So, Fiona Agyemang, thank you so much for joining me. You are a dating and mindset coach.
Yes, I am. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. So, on the previous episode, we talked about longevity of relationships. But today, I know we're going to be talking a lot around finding love and relationships in later life.
Yep.
So, how did you come about the career? Where did that passion for this come from?
To be honest, it came out of my own journey. So I was that singleton. My whole life I struggled with relationships. I actually met my partner online dating in my 40s. So I'm now 50. I met my partner in my 40s. And to be honest, all through my life, I had sabotage relationships. I'd shut them down. I'd focused on other areas. And it wasn't until I went through my own journey of really understanding what that was about that I actually got to a space where I could allow love in. I dated lovely men, great men. I'll be honest, I was the problem in the relationships because I would attract great men, but then it was almost like I couldn't allow that love in. So I would sabotage or, put blocks in place. So I went through a really long healing process myself, met my wonderful partner. And then what generally happens when you go through a massive transformation, people start asking you, what's changed, what's happened. So it really came about from sort of passing on my knowledge to friends, first of all. Previously, I was a business startup coach. So I was coaching women already. Women were starting to ask about my journey in love rather than business startup. And that's kind of where it came. So I sort of stumbled into it. But it was, yeah, through my own experience.
Thanks for sharing that. It's a really empowering message. Um, what do you think the three common mistakes people make when they're trying to find a relationship?
I think the biggest mistake is not really being honest and open about what you want. So many people are scared of saying, I want marriage, I want commitment, for fear of putting the other person off, coming on too strong, and then finding themselves in relationships that aren't working for them, especially at these times of in our lives. We don't have time to waste.
Yeah.
So if you are looking for a life partner, when you meet someone, you need to just straight away say what you're looking for. Great if it filters out people that aren't interested and you annoy some people, great, get rid of them because we want to filter those people out to meet the one. I think another thing is just having really narrow criteria. People, again, we get to these ages, I'm 50, get to these ages, we're set in our ways. There's certain things that we say are non-negotiables to us. We won't allow. It could be silly things like where somebody lives or their career or their financial status, those kind of things. But it can really narrow your search. And I think again, the dating pool, the reality is the dating pool is smaller at
Yeah.
these ages. And so to allow yourself the opportunity to meet a wonderful partner, you need to widen up that search. So, and then the third one, you asked me for three.
I did indeed.
The third one I think is just not dating strategically. I think again at these ages, when the pool is smaller, you need to really approach dating with a strategy. And I'm very much about intentional dating and creating a strategy that allows you to quickly find your partner rather than waste time kind of endlessly swiping or going on dates with people that are not aligned with you or getting into relationships that aren't particularly what you want and staying in them too long. So, really understanding what you want, being clear about it, having a criteria that allows you to open up to more people, and then dating strategically.
Thank you so much for sharing. So, in terms of that, obviously, I think point one was around knowing when to say almost like, no, that's not for me. And then the dating strategically. What advice do you give to people for them to be able to find the confidence to do that?
I think really you need to spend time and understand exactly what you want. A lot of people are dating and they don't know what they want. So, and a lot of people think about surface things that they want as well. If I ask clients, what is it you're looking for? Tall, dark, handsome,
Yes.
the usual. It's like, let's go a little bit deeper. How do you want to feel in that relationship? What kind of experiences do you want to have together? Because I think when you're crystal clear on what you want, it's much easier to find it. But when people are going out there and they're dating without really understanding what they want, you're going to get crap coming to you. Can I say that?
You can say that, of course you can. I relate back and actually listening to your story very much to my teens and 20s. So there were some significant things that happened in my life, and it took away a lot of my confidence, and I
Yeah.
became very insecure.
Yeah.
So the relationships I saw were relationships that made me feel needed, not necessarily the right relationships,
Yeah.
but needed, and
Yeah.
in turn that meant the cycle carried on.
Yeah.
And similarly, it wasn't until the time that I realized I needed to find self-love,
Yeah.
and recognize myself as special and bringing well-being to myself,
Yeah.
that then a relationship found me.
Yeah.
So why does mindset play such an important role within finding relationships?
I mean, mindset's everything.
Yeah.
Mindset is really the energy that you're bringing to, you know, your dating experience. Mindset is how you show up. It's the negativity or positivity that you're going to bring. It's how you think the outcome's going to be. Dating is hard. Dating is really hard. Let's be honest. It's not easy for people out there. And I don't want people to think that I'm going to sit here and say that dating is easy. But the energy that you bring and the mindset that you bring is going to make the experience easier or harder. Again, I think with dating isn't, when you go on a date, it isn't necessarily about, you shouldn't be going on a date thinking that you're going to meet your life partner on that date. It's an experience, it's a connection, it's finding out about yourself, what you enjoy, what you like, who you are, who you want to connect with. And I think a lot of people go into dating with the wrong mindset. It's not going to work. It's going to be awful. Online dating's horrible. I met my partner online dating. It was great. I enjoyed online dating because I went with a positive mindset that I was going to have great experiences, meet good people. And so I think really the energy that you take into the dating world is the energy that you're going to get back and the outcome you're going to get back.
Are dating apps helpful or hurtful to dating and relationships?
I think generally both.
Both.
I think they are helpful in the sense that they open us up to people that we would never encounter, especially as it is now. A lot of people don't go to work. People work from home. People aren't socializing as much, aren't going out as much. This online world that we live in, we're not connecting as much in the real world. So that's a plus and a minus.
Yes.
It's a plus that online dating apps allow us to still connect with people, but it can be a negative. It pulls us away from connecting in real life. Um, but on the downside, I think the way that people are using apps sometimes is hurtful. There's this real kind of shopping mentality, and that what else? What else is out there? Who could be better? And so I think a lot of people are unable to really commit to someone because they swipe, they connect with someone, but there is this fear of, well, there might be something better going on. And I think apps are great. They're a tool. They're only one tool. And I think people either are all in on dating apps and not meeting people in the real world, or they absolutely hate dating apps and would never go on them. And I just think really they're another tool in the toolbox to meet people. Used correctly and strategically, which I'll keep saying, I think they can be a really useful way of meeting people.
So for those that are out there that are perhaps wanting to find that relationship or indeed go on dates, but are fearful of the harmful sides of dating apps, what advice would you give to them to help them to think out, I'll give it a go?
I think, you do need to be very safe online. There are a lot of scammers on there. There are people that are not on there for the right reasons. So, safety is paramount. There's so many things that you can do when you're online dating. I mean, I create with my clients a kind of funneling system where you approach people, and you connect. And then the first thing is to obviously have a conversation. Now, sometimes people have conversations online for months and months and months.
Yes.
The point of dating on apps is to get off the apps. So, talking and having a pen pal with someone for 3 months defeats the object of why you're on there. So, the first thing is to move that to a call. Now, most of these apps have got built in online call facilities. So you should be having a call online with someone to see if they're a real person, and have calls in different locations to see that they are in the country and they are who they say they are and they're available at different times. And then move it to meeting in person. And that really should be as quickly as possible. In terms of filtering, you're going to be filtering a lot of people out. There's a funneling system.
Yes.
There's going to be a lot of people that go into the funnel, and then as they come down the funnel, there's only going to be a few that you meet. But that process should be quite quickly, because I think it's very easy for people to hide behind having a certain persona or being a certain type of person behind a keyboard. You need to really meet the person on a screen, meet them in real life to, fully understand if they're a real, genuine person.
Do you think there are differences to the approach to dating in the dating world from perhaps being teens, 20s to being a little bit later in life?
Yeah, I think, people, let's say 40, 50, 60, they're struggling with online. Some people are struggling with online dating because it's new. It's not how we used to date. Um, but I think dating 40s and over and online dating is amazing. We've got so much more freedom, we've got time, we've got money, so we can enjoy dating. We know who we are, we've had life experiences. So it can be a really fun time. I think there's a lot of people at these ages that are back out in the dating world. It's a lot of widowers. My
Yes.
partner is a widower.
Hmm.
And there's divorced people that are going back in the market. There's people that have never been married, like myself, who want to do it later in life. So obviously in your 40s, the pool is smaller. So again, it's really about, I think you have to actively be dating. I hear so many women that just say that they just want it to happen organically. They want to meet their guy in the supermarket or whatever. Yes, that can happen, but I think it's slim.
Yes.
So I think you really need to be intentional, and you really do need to be um, putting yourself out there.
Yeah, I think back to my 24 years in social care now, and all of the different couples that I've met, people that have lived in the home who indeed, their loved ones might come to visit,
Yeah.
and all of the stories that would be shared, and often they would be related to how they met their
Oh,
husbands,
those are
wives,
great
etc.
stories.
Absolutely fantastic stories. They related a lot to, things like you often hear about the dance halls
Yeah.
of yesteryear, and how they will have met there, or indeed found relationships in school, and it carried on since then.
Yeah.
Um, you've obviously spoken about the world changing, and people don't necessarily or can't necessarily um, always find people in that way.
Yeah.
How do you tell the difference between a spark and true long-term potential?
I mean, the only thing you can do is give it time. A spark is that initial excitement, that initial attraction. And obviously, if you're meeting someone new, there's going to be a spark because it's interesting. You're learning about them, everything's fun and exciting. That's the time when we can overlook red flags. We can ignore them, not see them at all. You're caught up in maybe the sexual chemistry and the attraction and all that kind of stuff. But I always say that really, when you're dating someone for the first 3 to 4 months, you're really meeting their representative. They're showing you their representative and you're showing them your representative. So you're not meeting the true person. So I think, yeah, you have to give it time. You have to see someone in different situations. Bit of conflict has to be in there. Go away for a weekend or a week away. That will show you how, what someone's about. And then see if you're really fully aligned, rather than just with, chemistry. Keep it out of the bedroom at the beginning. That always helps.
Yeah, I can imagine that could confuse things sometimes.
Definitely, definitely.
So you spoke about chemistry. Is chemistry the same thing as compatibility?
Not at all. Not at all. And so many people get this confused. And I think people focus on chemistry. They put so much emphasis on chemistry. Chemistry actually, I think in some ways, chemistry can actually be mastered, seen as excitement, but it can actually be anxiety. Is he going to call? Does he like me? Does she want to have another date? All those kind of things. Whereas compatibility is really about people being aligned, having shared values, and it's so important. I mean, it's important in any relationship, but if we're talking about people meeting later in life, you want someone who's going to go through big life changes with you.
Mhm.
These are new stages in our life, and if you're not compatible, if you don't meet someone who's on the same path, for example, I want to go off traveling. If my partner wanted to start another business or wanted to really grow in his business, even though he does, then we would not be compatible in that. But, we could have amazing chemistry, but if we're not aligned in where we are in life, um, it's not going to have longevity. And there's so many things that we're going through in these stages. Women, menopause, that's a huge thing, a massive change. Illnesses, our children leaving home, becoming grandparents, winding down our jobs, all those kind of things. And you're in the care industry.
Yes.
I always say that really what we want to have is a partner by our side who's going to go through these really difficult stages with our parents. We might be putting our parents into homes. We might be caring for our parents. We might be losing our parents. And so, chemistry and sparks, fantastic. But is that person going to be by your side when you're going through really, really tough things in life?
It comes down to communication again, doesn't it? And being able to have those open conversations with
Yeah,
people. How can you
100%.
find out how compatible you are unless you
Yeah,
own the conversations?
yeah.
What qualities matter in a long-term partner?
Again, I think alignment is absolutely key. Shared values, alignment. And I think finding someone that has a growth mindset because, there's, as I mentioned before, there's so many things that happen within a relationship, so many stresses and issues that happen, outside of the relationship even. And I think it's so important to find someone that's going to grow, develop, and want to solve issues rather than run at the first hurdle. Because again, at these stages, it's life changing. There's so many things. My life has changed massively in the last sort of 10 years. And from meeting my partner, we've been through a lot of stuff, and I think, all relationships go through a lot of stuff, but I think we're going through different things because we're moving into a different stage of our life. And so really having someone who is aligned with where I am, um, has the same mindset, the same values, and definitely a growth mindset.
Or what would you advise to people in terms of them being able to recognize a difference between somebody with a growth mindset and somebody with a more fixed mindset?
I mean, it comes down to when issues present themselves, how you communicate, how you are prepared to sit down and kind of tough it out. When you're faced with something really, really difficult, a lot of people do have that mindset to shut down or to close down or to bolt and not want to face it. And really, a growth mindset is looking at how can we come together? What are all the options? Okay, this isn't ideal, but we're going to stay in this, we're going to stick in this, and we're going to find a solution.
Why is self-care so important?
I mean, self care is one of those things that, people sometimes think self care is about having bubble baths and going for a pedicure. And it is. It's about taking time for yourself. But really, self care is about the love that you give yourself, the care that you give yourself, the importance that you place on yourself. And if we don't have that self care for ourselves and we're not looking after ourselves or treating ourselves kindly, then when we meet somebody, how are we going to allow that same love to come to us? We're starting with ourselves. Um, Starting with ourselves will allow us to know what we're going to expect from other people. So it's about taking time for yourself. It's about prioritizing yourself, setting boundaries, looking after yourself. But you spoke about, going through a stage when you were younger and needing to really take some time to, love yourself and look after yourself. And that allowed you to then open yourself up to love. If we don't do that to begin with, it's really hard to accept love or to accept the right kind of love.
Yes. Yeah, something I really understand completely. How does focusing on yourself help you attract the right partner?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, when I work with clients, I start by asking clients, what do you want? What are you looking for? And people find it very easy to say what they're looking for. They often find it easy to say what they don't want as well, but I bring them back to what they do want. So once they've told me what they want, my next question to them is, are you that? Do you have those qualities? Do you possess those skills? Are you that kind of person? If you're saying you want someone emotionally available, are you emotionally available? You want somebody who's developing themselves. Do you develop yourselves? Are you fun? Are you exciting? Whatever those things are. And I think it's so important that people start with themselves and get to a place where they become what they want to attract, because our relationships are mirrors of us.
Mhm.
So if you're wanting a person who has this growth mindset and is emotionally available and kind and considerate and caring and all of those things, you've got to start make sure that you're that, first of all, so that you can attract and, more importantly, sustain a relationship with that kind of person. So it could be that you need to do some healing, could be that you need to do some work, it could be that you need to, focus on some areas of your life and do some growth in some areas. So I think it is so, so important. And people, I believe, need to stop looking outwardly. Stop looking at the apps, and it's the apps and it's timing and it's my work schedule and it's the kids and it's all of this, and really just look at themselves and say, what do I need to become to attract the kind of love and relationship and love that I want?
Thank you. It's a great answer. How can people who struggle to put themselves first find a way to manage their own emotional needs?
This is really hard, and I bet you meet a lot of people in your industry that are caring for other people, and so maybe their needs are secondary. Everything starts with awareness. So first of all, it's really to look at, why is this happening? Where does it come from? Where is this need for me to put myself behind other people's needs? And then once you've got awareness, you can really start to notice it showing up in areas of your life. And then it's really about putting in place small boundaries, really tiny, tiny boundaries, because it is really difficult for people that put other people first to even recognize their own needs and recognize when they're doing it. So it's really about thinking, what tiny little changes could I make to prioritize my own needs? So, for example, you invite me to a party on Friday, and I've had a really busy week, and I would normally just go because I don't want to upset you. Maybe say no, I'm busy, or picking the kids up or the grandkids or something. Just saying no to tiny things. And it's going to be really difficult to begin with. It's going to be difficult for the person, and it's also going to be difficult for the people that they're saying no to, because they've never experienced them, saying no to things. And then I think, after that, it's really about prioritizing yourself and putting in place non-negotiable time, for you to show up for things that are important to you. So that could literally be something tiny, like on a Sunday morning, I'm going to read the papers, and I'm going to have half an hour of reading the papers on my own, uninterrupted. Or I'm going to go to my Thursday Pilates class. And they are non negotiable things that are important to you. And it doesn't matter what comes up, you're not going to allow yourself to be put to the kind of background to allow other things to come forward.
If you could tell your younger self one thing about finding love, what would that be?
Oh, 100% do the work. Do the work, because, a lot of the things we've spoken about today is about really starting with ourselves,
Yeah.
and I went through life kind of thinking that everybody else had a problem. And I'm not saying I had a problem, but there was some stuff that I needed to resolve, some traumas. I lost my mum very, very young. So I had massive abandonment issues. I had fear of intimacy, fear of getting close, fear of letting people get close to me. But I wasn't aware of it, because you're going through life, and, that was my life. That was just what had happened. Um, but doing that work and actually understanding where my stuff came from allowed me to make sense of it and put in place strategies that allowed me to cope with them. And then having that mindset that we've spoken about. So moving away from, I'm unlovable, I'll never meet anybody, because those were my beliefs. Those were all of my beliefs, because what had happened to me as a younger child. So having that mindset that allowed me to be open to receiving love, and then dating strategically, as as I like to say. So really, it's about doing the work and approaching it um, in a holistic way.
What's the one piece of dating advice that everyone should know?
I think you need to date like you're looking for your next big job, your next big promotion, or starting a business. For some reason, I don't know what it is about dating, but people seem to think that they can just let it happen. Any other big goal in our life, we put effort in. We plan. If you think about looking for a new job or looking for a big promotion, going for a big promotion, you might do some training. You might need to upskill. You'd send out CVs. You wouldn't send out one CV and then wait for that company to come back to you and, just wait for that one company. You might get a coach, you might get a mentor, you might have some, there's so much that you would do and you would invest in looking for this job. But for some reason with dating, we're just going to sit back and hope that, the one comes along in Sainsbury's and we have a little meet cute across the kind of Apple counter or whatever it is. So it's really about making it as important as every other big goal that we have in life.